Kamala Harris has a plan that would raise taxes by $5 trillion.
What's going to stop the inflation? And you also mentioned AI and productivity and technology.
Trump's performance was superior to Biden and Harris, and that includes small business conditions, real earnings for workers, keeping inflation down, grocery prices, mortgages, all these things. And that's why, you were saying you think Trump is going to win this race. Trump is a businessman.
I made over $10 billion. I had a casino company, Caesars.
He has investments in or owns companies in at least 25 countries. Everything from real estate, golf courses, to branding projects.
How do you think that they're able to continue to do that? Do people just know their life was better? Is that where the momentum is coming from?
Kamala Harris is a lawyer who spent her whole life, although she has 1 year experience in business, she did work at McDonald's. So we're going to cut taxes, increase the production of oil, increase the production of energy, increase the number of eggs, the farm product, and that's going to drive prices down.
Welcome back to a special edition of our show brought to you from Orlando at The Money Show. I'm Jim Uriel, that's Bob Iacino, and in the middle, if you don't know who he is, you should hit yourself on the head with a hammer and then crawl back under the rock you live in, because it is Stephen Moore, an economist, advisors to presidents, been around the block a long time, and we did just grab him as he was heading out to the golf course, and Bobby wrestled him to get him in this chair. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jim, for having me.
Okay, so again, I think you've probably heard of this. It was in some of the papers, but there's an election coming up in 3 weeks. Yeah, I think there is. And in this, we always joke on our show, because it's not 100% true, that we're not into politics, but we're hugely into policy. We're traders, and we go back from macro policy down to technical analysis. But when we look at this particular election, the tax policy is so ridiculously bifurcated that these two candidates are pushing forward. Can you walk us through what the implications of that could be? And I'll just sit my water and let you take the whole time.
Just for full disclosure, so your audience knows, I am a Trump economic advisor, so I have a bias, folks, and you can take it or leave it. But I do, look, I've studied tax policy for 40 years. I go back to the Reagan years. And, every time we've cut taxes, good things have happened for the economy under Reagan and under Trump and in other countries. And every time we've raised taxes, bad things have happened. So it's not that complicated. And Kamala Harris has a plan that would raise taxes by $5 trillion. And I'll give her credit. She's telling the American people, if you vote for me, this is what I'm going to do. Usually Democrats say, I'm not going to raise your taxes, and then they do. She's saying, vote for me, and taxes are going to go way up. Now, she's saying that's only going to be the very rich, but we know that when the Democrats talk about raising taxes, it affects everyone. And by the way, the reason it has to affect everyone is because most of the money in the American economy is in the middle class. There are 200 million people in the middle class, and they have the money. So I do think you're an investment show. A lot of people are watching and listening to the show because they're interested in making money. That if Kamala was elected and she did what she's saying she's going to do, which is to double the capital gains tax, double the dividend tax, increase the corporate tax rate from right now we got it down to 21%. She wants to raise it back up to, I think, around 30%. That is going to hurt shareholders. This is just math.
Of course it is.
This isn't ideology. If you every time you raise the corporate tax, you're essentially diluting the shares that people have because the government has the first dibs on the profits.
Damn right.
Right. That's math. It's not ideology. So I think it would be bad for America. I think what would happen if you put that tax. Oh, did I mention the fact that she wants to tax unrealized capital?
Which is the most asinine thing I've ever heard.
know.
They're not going
It's
to tax
scary.
unrealized losses. And by the way, tell me the day that Jeff Bezos has to sell his 2% share to meet his tax burden, because I'm going to front run the hell out of that thing. That's what traders do, legally do.
Exactly.
But anyway, there's one more thing I wanted to get you on, because the capital gains tax you mentioned. In a debate in 2008 between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton.
remember.
They fully admitted something that we all know.
That it would not
Every
raise
time
them.
you lower capital gains tax, you increase the revenues. Obviously, that wouldn't work going down to zero. And every time you raise it, you decrease the revenues. Why on God's green earth do they insist on raising capital gains taxes, knowing full well that it'll shrink revenue?
Well, bravo to Barack Obama for admitting that.
it.
But a lot of Democrats today don't believe that. They don't understand supply-side economics. They don't believe that, Art Laffer is my mentor and the co-author of my new book, and thank you so much for mentioning it. It's called The Trump Economic Miracle. And by the way, do you know who came up with that title?
You?
No.
Larry?
No?
President Trump.
Trump. Okay, yeah. Trump did. We went and showed him the book and the graphics, and he loved it. He's, because you can read this book in 3 nights. And anyway, Trump said, "What are you going to call this thing?" And we said, "Well, sir, we thought we'd call it Trumponomics 2.0 because Arthur and I had written a book called Trumponomics back about 5 years ago." He said, "I don't like that title. Call it the Trump Economic Miracle." So that's how it came about. But anyway, in the book, we really do lay out the fact that the Trump tax cut was a huge success.
Huge.
I mean, we brought a lot of businesses back to the United States. We actually increased revenues. Remember that? You guys familiar with the term corporate inversions?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, I do remember,
Yeah,
yeah.
when
Yeah.
companies
Walgreens
would
did it with Boots
basically
Alliance.
leave the United
Right.
States and go to the Bahamas or
Yep.
Bermuda
Yeah.
or Ireland or
Ireland.
some other country with lower taxes. And that was happening. It seemed like every month a major company was. Why did they do that? Because our tax rate was way up here and these other countries were way down there. You know how many corporate inversions we've had since the Trump tax cut? 0, not one.
It's
yeah.
mad.
In fact, if anything, we brought companies back home. So Kamala wants to raise that back up. It's like if you play the record in reverse, you're going to get the reverse outcome. So I think it's almost unpatriotic to be talking about raising our business. As you were at my presentation today, I showed that under the Kamala Harris plan, we would have a higher business tax than Russia and China. That's crazy. They're socialist
I can't
countries.
even get my head around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm going to wake up in the night in a sweat about that.
Let me first, before I ask you a question, the book is out now.
Just came out about
by the way,
a
we're
week
good at
ago,
selling
and
books.
You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah,
We're
that's what I was
proud.
gonna say.
We're #1 on Amazon in business and economics.
Oh, then you
and,
don't need our help.
Trump
What I'd
held
like
it up
to-
the other day, and he loves it.
What I'd like to do is buy the book, read it, and then have you back on once I've read it, because I didn't know
Do
you
you
had
have
a new book out.
$14.95? That's what it costs.
Can you
When I get paid next week, I will have it.
We'll put it together. We'll figure it out.
So,
Yeah, just one quick word on this. I want people to get it, A, so you can be more informed, but B, if you know people who are undecided voters, a friend, a family member, a neighbor, this is going to be a close, I still think this is going to be a close election. And I think when people read this, all we do is present the evidence. This is what happened when Trump was president. This is what happened when Kamala Harris and Biden were in charge. And then people can make up their own mind. But I got to tell you, we looked at 22 major economic measurements, and on 20 of those, Trump's performance was superior to Biden and Harris. And that
Okay,
includes
so-
small business conditions, real earnings for workers, keeping inflation down, grocery prices, mortgages, all these things. And that's why, you were saying you think Trump is going to win this race. You may well be right, God willing, I hope you are. But if he does, it's because people hate inflation. They hate it. It kills their
We've known that
income.
forever,
They
right?
can't buy
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So from a perspective of, and forgive me if you covered this in the book, because I would like people to buy it. People tend to buy books when we recommend them, but I haven't read it
we
yet.
have a good record on that.
Is
Yeah.
when I look at 2016, one of the things to me that was amazing that people don't seem to talk about or realize is that we were in an 8-year bull market, and bull markets run 8 to 10 years. And Trump continued it on and accelerated it, which is the difficult part. I always say that presidents get too much credit and too much blame, but there are some things they can do. If you have an administration that actually is able to extend an older bull market, that to me is actually where credit should be given.
great
Now,
point.
this particular one, right, is, let's call it 3 years old, right? This particular bull market we're in now made new all-time highs again last week. And now the president, if he wins, which Jimmy's predicting, and I kind of agree with him, he's going to be coming into a completely different situation where you potentially have higher inflation. He seems to favor the Fed keeping rates low. I'm not so sure about that, but given the debt, maybe it's a good idea. Do you think that he has sort of the toolbox to extend a young bull market that's already succumbed to inflation that was generated via the Milton Friedman way of government printing money?
First of all, as I showed in my presentation today, the stock market did better when Trump was president than Biden when you adjust for inflation.
Yeah.
And investors should always, like under Jimmy Carter, one of the previous speakers to me said, look, the stock market went up under these Democratic presidents. Well, it is true the stock market went up under Jimmy Carter, but in real terms it crashed.
Inflation or whatever,
it crashed
on average,
because you had the high inflation. So when you take into account inflation, now like the last 18 months, we've seen a nice run on the market. But the answer to your question is, I do think it's going to be like taking a champagne bottle and shaking it up and taking that cork off it. I think you're going to see so much optimism. I listened to Elon Musk the other day, and he was saying the same thing. It's like, this is an exciting future we have ahead of us. We're just at the start of this technology age. AI, robotics, things are the incredible advances that are happening in medicine. We think in the next 10 years we can wipe out cancer and heart disease. So I think there's no limit to what we can do, but you just have to get the policy impediments out of the way. The regulations, the high tax rates, the soak the rich stuff. Why don't we just try to make everybody rich?
Well, do you think that people don't know this, in 2019, the New York Times, of course a famously conservative paper, wrote an article that said, face it, you probably got a tax cut.
Yeah.
And yet they still go out there and say he cut taxes for the rich, when literally their paper of record, the left, says you got a tax cut. And in that article, I read it, it said 96.8% of the people that work got a tax cut. Right? So how do you think that they're able to continue to do that? Do people just know their life was better? Is that where the momentum is coming from? Doesn't matter the details. We know our wife was. Now you've got this epidemic of people saying you guys just don't understand the data. That's why you think your life is bad. We were just talking about that. How do you think that sort of filters through the average person that's now seeming to be realizing it? Is it just?
I think it shows a couple things. One is how out of touch Wall Street and Washington and
Hollywood,
the media centers are. They're out of touch with middle class America, because middle class Americans have seen, and by the way, it's not just the overall 20% increase in the consumer price index, but food prices are up 24%, mortgages are up 70%, electric utility bills and gasoline are up 35%. How many people got raises that keep up with that? Not that many.
Not that high.
So a lot of people are feeling they're more financially stressed. Now, what's my evidence of that? Well, first of all, ask people, and they say, I'm having a hard time making ends meet. The second thing you see in kind of real data is, have you seen the credit card debt numbers? Those are really
and the default's
troubling.
going up.
They keep going up and up and up, because what people are doing, trying to maintain their normal standard of living, their paycheck isn't covering it. So what do they have to do? They have to ring up a bigger debt on their credit card. So I think if Trump wins, it's going to be the revolt of the middle class, really, because the super rich love Biden and Harris. They love, do you think Bill Gates cares about inflation? Or the price of bread or eggs?
Insulated
of course not.
from any policy mistake.
Right.
Yes.
And then the very poor, because they're all getting all these government benefits. The people who I think are what we call them, the forgotten Americans. The Americans who work hard, and including union members. I think Trump's going to win the union vote.
I do too.
Even though the union leaders are all against it.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Well, we promised Stephen we'd let him make his tea time, which makes me mad, because
I got time for one or two more quick questions.
Well, here's my question, though.
Okay, because I'm having fun with you.
You mentioned the champagne bottle, and as you were saying it sounded inflationary to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's going to stop the inflation? And you also mentioned AI and productivity and technology. And I believe that that Paul Volcker, I think that the internet was a huge thing when he slayed inflation too. Is that what we're rolling the dice on, that's going to be the thing that quells inflation?
Well, I'm what you call a supply side economist. Now, what does that mean? It means I want to increase the supply, the production of goods and services. Now, my mentor, as you know, is Arthur Laffer, who, by the way, how in the world does he not have a Nobel Prize in economics? He's the most influential economist in the world by far.
He should take Krugman's.
But he's very, one of the reasons he's such a great economist is he's a great trained economist, but he also explains things to people in ways that most economists are terrible communicators. And so, he puts it very simple, and I'll put it to you guys. If the economy produced more eggs, what happens to the price of eggs?
Goes down.
They go down.
Yeah.
So if you increase the supply of goods, this is something that my liberal friends just don't get. And I do have a lot of liberal friends, and they try to get it, but they can't get it. They keep thinking, oh, if you cut taxes, you're going to get more. No, we're going to cut taxes, increase the production of oil, increase the production of energy, increase the number of eggs, the farm product, and that's going to drive prices down. This happened under Reagan. Remember?
Yeah, sure.
Under Reagan, when he came into office, we had 11% inflation, and part of it was Paul Volcker. You're right.
Yeah.
He brought the interest rates up and constrained the money supply, because what is inflation? This is elementary. This is Economist 100.
Milt
Inflation
told
is
us.
too many dollars chasing too few goods. What's happened under Biden, we're not producing enough goods and services, and they're pouring money into the economy. Okay. It's as obvious as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west that if you do that, you're going to get. Why is it that all these economists said, don't worry, Biden's not going to cause inflation?
Of course he is.
It's obvious that was going to happen.
No question about it. By the way, that's such a great answer that you just gave too, because in my head I'm thinking we are rolling the dice just on the technology portion of this, and we're not. Of course it's a supply side.
But you're also right that technology's been an enormous, enormous increase in productivity.
It makes me more productive.
AI
does
everyone.
hugely.
My first job in Washington, when I was a research assistant in 1983, what I did every afternoon was I had you'll love the story, I had one of these passes to go into the Library of Congress and go into the stacks. It was pretty cool to see all the books they have, and not many people had those. And I would spend all afternoon looking up like 10 statistics for the economists there. All afternoon.
Oh, it sounds fantastic.
Now you can go on this and find it out in 30 seconds.
Yes.
I mean, think about the productivity.
It is
That's
crazy.
just one little example.
You don't even have to leave your desk, and it doesn't. Yes,
exactly.
It's crazy.
I love these people say, Google, they're a monopolist. How are they monopolists? They provide me Google for free.
Yeah.
My first job on the trading floor was actually tearing off pages of green graph paper,
Yeah.
filling in the price bars,
Right.
putting it on the wall next to the last piece of graph paper, literally just hand drawing a chart, sticking it on the wall.
I remember they'd be across the wall.
Across the wall,
on
yeah, that's
paper.
the way we looked at price charts. So it's your belief, and I tend to agree with you, it's an interesting point in time, right? Because we got declining birth rates,
That's a
we
big
have
problem.
AI.
That's a
So
big
we have this, without the influx of migrants, we theoretically are going to need fewer jobs, and we have a declining birth rate. So we're likely to unleash the productivity miracle that most people believe is the only way out of this inflationary cycle without a recession.
So I agree with about everything you just said, although I don't agree. I think, look, you mentioned birth rates.
Yes.
This is something economists and people in finance have to start paying attention to. This is one of the biggest issues in the world right now. And I'm old enough to remember, by the way, these lunatic, apocalyptics said the population bomb. There's no population bomb today. You look at the birth rates in countries like China, in Korea, in India, in Japan. They have catastrophic reductions in their population. Now, the United States, we're slightly below replacement level fertility. I'm a baby boomer. I guess you guys are probably a little younger than me.
And by a hair.
Yeah,
So
we
we're
just
retiring at fast pace. I think I read 10,000 people a day are retiring. I'm 64. I hope I can still work till 84 like Art Laffer is doing. But my point is, the United States has one advantage over every other country. What's that? Immigration.
Oh,
We
yeah,
can-
they
we
want
can
to come
bring
here, of course.
No other
yeah.
country.
Yeah.
We bring in these incredibly productive, smart, what Larry Kudlow calls the brainiacs. I'm in favor of
Oh,
immigration.
no doubt about it.
Strongly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the hallmarks of our success. But they have to come legally.
Of course.
Legally. That's why I'm so pissed off, frankly, excuse my language, with Biden and Harris. What they've done is contaminated the immigration system.
We're both from immigrant households.
Yeah. No, I mean, immigrants are amazing
Yeah, we're
assets to
pro-immigrants,
the
yeah.
country. But you can't let in criminals and potential terrorists and people who are just going to be deadbeats.
Unvetted. It's asinine.
Yeah. So let's get back to, and Trump said this the other day in a speech, and I was watching it on TV, and I rose out. He said, "We want people to come here, but they just have to come here the right way."
Yes.
Why is that so hard?
Yeah.
The reason
Wait,
that
you said you're from an immigrant household?
Yeah, my
What-
parents spoke
from where?
Italian, Italy.
Italy.
Yeah, I was the first one born. Well, my brother and I were the first ones born here. My parents
Oh my
are both
gosh.
immigrants from Italy. I spoke Italian.
What about you?
Before I
my
spoke English.
grandpa was the patriarch of my household, and he was off the boat. So
was what?
he was off the boat Italy as well.
Okay, you're both Italians. That explains everything.
It explains a lot of things.
That's why do you think the hands are going? all
It
over
explains
Well,
why
like,
we looked at you crooked when you said, pardon
I'm
my
Irish.
language.
I have Irish blood. My grandfather came from Ireland, and this is an amazing story. He comes as a 14-year-old kid from Ireland for a better life, a better way of life. Gets here. What's the first thing that happens? They put him in a uniform and they send him back to Europe to fight World War I.
He's in France shooting.
He had got his arm. He was maimed. His arm was blown off, but he said, he used to say, "I'm just so glad that they didn't take my leg." I mean, that's kind of the can-do attitude of America. Look, I'm really optimistic about our country. I think we have such an advantage. The whole thing about China. I don't think China's going to outcompete us. I think China's a bubble economy. They don't have the right economic model. It's all central planning. Show me anywhere where central planning has ever worked.
You can't. And why would we ever want to gravitate more towards that model here?
Exactly.
It is completely out.
Exactly.
I can't.
And everything Kamala wants to do is national industrial policy. Like the government and the politicians are going to say, invest here, invest there. A good example of all this money they've invested in EVs and people aren't buying them.
Right. Yes. Yes, it's
It's
amazing.
interesting. I was in Italy when I was about 21 years old, and I was just telling a friend of mine this story when I was driving down, up here from Southwest Florida, where I live. And I remember being in a household, my uncle, and there was a bunch of people my generation, and then he had invited a college professor, a friend of his over, taught in the University of Rome, if that exists, I don't know. But he was just knocking America. And I was 20. I did my best to defend us. But at one point, my answer was just, hey, F you, I don't care what you think, I'll fight you, right? That ended up being my...
That was fighting words, right?
That's what we always end up doing.
Later on, we go downstairs to a cafe, and there's a bunch of people that drive taxis and drive buses, and they all wanted to come to America.
Yeah, sure.
And the amazing thing to me is I thought about it, and then I remember talking to my dad about it, and he goes, anyone who works wants to come here. Anyone who wants to be catered by the government wants to stay there.
So, you're so right about that. And so much of the, immigrants have high labor force participation rates. They're hardworking people. I always say we wouldn't have a Silicon Valley today if it weren't for the combination of great American minds combined with some of the great minds around the world. No other country in the world can do that. Not China, not Japan, not Europe. And so it really is so important to our success. And so I am optimistic. I think the U.S. has a great future. And I believe Reagan said it best, that I believe that it was divine providence that put America here as a beacon of freedom and free enterprise for the rest of the world. And the problem is, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then I got to get on the golf course, but
we're going to release the shackles from his feet. We have him tied down right now.
Now I forgot what I was going to say.
When we get past 60, that's
Divine providence.
Divine providence.
Oh yeah, I think there are a lot of leftists who don't understand that about America.
I believe that too.
They don't really see that we are a special place, and that what made us the most successful country in the world is freedom and free enterprise. And they want the government to take over a larger and larger role in our economy, and I guarantee you that would be catastrophic. But we're not going to let that happen.
We're going to keep fighting.
Yeah,
we enjoy the fight.
Yeah, me too.
I've never felt more of a purpose now. That's
Good.
one of the reasons we have the shows that we have. And again, by the way, yes, he works for President Trump, and we have criticized some Trump policies before too.
I don't like his tariffs.
We don't love the tariffs.
I like all the other stuff.
Yeah. So we are not.
And by the way, let me just say one other quick thing. Sure. I know we're over here, but this is one thing I really respect about Donald Trump. He knows I don't agree with him on tariffs. I've argued with him many times about it, and I've been in the Oval Office with him. Sometimes he kicks me out and he gets mad at me. But the point is, it's not like everybody drinking the same Kool-Aid.
Good.
You can have an argument. If he liked the idea, he would do it. I would go with him, go into the Oval Office 4 or 5 times a year. I never actually worked for him, but I'd say, I've got an idea, and he said, that's a great idea, let's do it. And so this is important too, because Trump is a businessman.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris is a lawyer who spent her whole life, although she has 1 year experience in business, she did work at McDonald's, although, at least she said she did. We don't really know.
I worked with her there. We were fry cooks.
What kind of a lowlife lies on their resume about working at McDonald's, right? So anyway, this has been fun to be with you guys. I got to get on the golf course, but anytime, and I love being with you.
Thank you, and thank you guys for joining us on these special shows. Jim Muriel, Bob Iacino, Stephen Moore. Thank you.
Thank you.